but it's also the 15th anniversary of Xbox, if you guys can believe it.
Yeah, and today, it's not even this week, like today, was the official launch of the original Xbox 2001.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
So I'm joined by Scott Butterworth.
Hello.
And Jake Decker.
How's it going?
Good, man. It's good. Yeah, I'm just trying to sort of silo myself in a world of video games and keep my head buried.
Yeah, part of me just wants to be like, everything's terrible, let's talk about that. But I agree, escape is something that some people need right now.
Right. So
games.
Let's look back to a better time.
Yeah.
The Xbox One launched November 15th, 2001. A few short months after the Dreamcast was basically discontinued and there was a gap in the console market, and here comes Microsoft with a massive, heavy machine.
Yeah, with a controller almost the same size.
Yeah, the Duke, right? Is that
Yeah,
what it was
I
called?
think so.
I can't remember if that was the official name or just the nickname. I think that may have actually been the official company
Internal,
name.
yeah.
Because the S, like the much more like boringly named S, was the follow-up controller that was much smaller and which is more wieldy in general.
Yeah, it did improve over time.
Yes.
Yeah.
You could knock someone out with the smaller controller.
God,
for sure.
it was such a like, I don't know, such an easy to mock thing. I remember there being like, this was the early days of internet memes, right? But this was already like a huge running joke anywhere you went on the internet. Deservedly so. That controller was terrible, but the console was like shockingly good.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, the biggest thing about the original Xbox was just going into it feeling so skeptical, like just scoffing at the notion of this PC company stepping into the console market. 'Cause I was in high school at the time, so I was like still had a bit of that like fanboyism in me.
Yeah.
And had been a big Nintendo fan growing up. I'm just like, who does Microsoft think they are making a console? This is ridiculous. This will never work.
Well, and
then, of course,
especially
it did.
like after a couple years of playing Dreamcast games, like I in particular was in love with the Dreamcast, and so I was heartbroken to see it go.
Yeah.
And yes, here comes Microsoft of all companies with a brand that is this sharp green X. It looked very aggressive. Like it didn't make sense. It didn't fit into what I think a lot of us thought consoles were, in part because Microsoft wasn't a console company, right? Like they worked with software mostly. They had some hardware experience, but this was their first jump back into that.
Yeah,
after a long time. And the console admittedly was kind of strange, right? It was like super powered, but it wasn't refined. It was basically a PC in a little box. But
Yeah.
because it was so powerful, we got a game like Halo Combat Evolved, which kind of evolved a lot of things about console gaming by making it, competitive with PC in the sense of competitive shooting being a thing. Did you guys have like fond memories of that? Because I was a PlayStation 2 Dreamcast guy. Xbox kind of washed over me until 360.
360 was definitely more of a big deal for me. Well, actually, and I want to point out one really, really important thing about the original Xbox that dovetails nicely with what you were saying is the arrival of Xbox Live a year later. So that didn't happen until, I think, exactly a year after the original launch. But Microsoft was arguably the first company to get an online network right. Like, you could play games online on Dreamcast, and you could play games online on
You
PS2
could play
by that
games
point.
online all the way back to the NES.
Okay,
So-
well, yeah, technically. Were you playing online in the...
No, but in Japan there were games that would use like it wasn't.
Okay, I guess
it wasn't
that's
in the
true.
direct sense that you're thinking, but it was like the start of that.
Yeah.
But yes, Microsoft certainly established like, look, here is a front, or like a software basically space that you can access all the stuff that you want to do.
Here's a dedicated UI.
Yeah,
like
you've got
have
friends,
a gamer
you
tag.
can-
You can
right,
have a friends
exactly,
list.
yeah.
Like that was new and that was amazing. And Halo was a big part of like that. The marriage of those two things, like Halo 2 plus Xbox Live, was like it was the biggest thing on consoles for years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Bungie was really kind of what figured that out with Halo too. Like Microsoft had the infrastructure for Xbox Live, and then Bungie was what actually put those pieces together and had I think they had friends list first and like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Although even the original Halo, like you're mentioning, like I remember playing split screen in college. So I lived with a bunch of people. Like I personally never owned an Xbox, but I lived with people who did. So I just played all of their games. And I remember like coming home after class to find everybody just sitting on a couch playing Halo. Green Halo, like the tiny 4 boxes on our crappy television. Even that was just such a joy at the time. It really came out of nowhere. It actually the Xbox was a much stronger competitor to the PlayStation 2. Really was going
Right. Arcade games, which is what Sega was basically still courting.
Yeah.
After maybe Dreamcast, Xbox, Sega were published on the Xbox as well.
Shout out to Yes, you're right. The sequel was what actually came out on Xbox, but they eventually ported anyways. It's
But so let's talk about the Xbox 360 now, because that was obviously where Microsoft, they were established at that point. And when the 360 came out, it was well ahead of everyone else.
Yeah.
And they certainly, they found a way to make a smaller console. And with that, they ended up launching really, really big series like Gears of War. And we didn't mention Fable at the beginning as well, but Fable, again, continued on at 360 as well as Halo and blossomed quite a bit. But we also got things like the Kinect. Not everything was.
there have been some. I think every console's endured a few missteps, right? I mean, even if you look back at, poor RIP Dreamcast in general, right? Like it was a little too ahead of its time, and Sony's had just as many stupid peripherals that completely failed, right? I mean that happens, but I think most of Microsoft failures didn't come until later, and I think that the launch of the 360. On the heels of, it was very clear that they learned a lot of lessons from the original Xbox. I mean, the original Xbox was a really powerful machine, as you pointed out, but unrefined. The 360 was, okay, what if we polish these edges and offer something that's a little more friendly? You could argue that's the exact same thing that Microsoft did in the 80s, and that's why, Windows became the standard operating system over what was arguably, that was part of what led to the company's success in the first place. So they kind of did the same thing again with the 360. Yeah. And I still love the Blades interface. I think that was a really great, that original. Yeah, I really liked it. So they clearly learned some lessons.
They also launched it a year before the PS3, which I think helped a lot.
And the price, it was
the price was
$100 lower.
You guys are leading me so well, you don't even know. Both of the things you just mentioned, it's fair to say those are probably the reasons why the Red Ring of Death became such a problem for Microsoft, because they cut back on manufacturing costs and they rushed a product to market before they were able to really test it to the extent that it needed. And I can't even count the number of Red Ring Xboxes we've had in this office.
Yeah.
I think when I joined, we had a stack.
I had 3.
You had 3 personally?
I had 3 by myself.
I got so lucky. My original 360 didn't die until I think after I had a PS3, actually. It lasted a very long time. It hung in there. So
lucky you.
Yeah. No, I did. I got very lucky. But I also my very first job in the industry ever was I was an intern at the official Xbox magazine, and I remember we had a stack of red ringed Xboxes. Yeah. A literal. It was just it's
just
another one
graveyard.
for the pile.
Yeah, we had at least a dozen here in the office.
Yeah,
at least
it was madness. And from what I remember, Microsoft was pretty good about it. You could actually send them an Xbox, and frequently you could get it repaired, but it was only within a 3-year warranty, I want to say. So some people totally got screwed.
There was they would send you a self-addressed box that you could send back. And there were certain people where if you bought it after one date, they would extend your warranty for a year. So, they did a pretty good job of picking up the pieces, definitely, but they also took a huge loss.
Yeah. Well, and it shouldn't have been a problem in the first place.
No.
It's crazy that was this major consumer product was just inevitably failed. That's nuts.
I haven't seen something like that again since maybe the Samsung Note 7 recently, right?
Right. Although that's kind of a different story in a way, because it was just third-party batteries. It's kind of different, but similar. You're right. A massive failure on this huge scale. Yeah.
So Microsoft is obviously still going very strong with the Xbox One, and in particular, the S has sort of really boosted sales for them. That's really helped out, I think, from a product design standpoint, but also just because it's cheaper now. And it's been outselling PlayStation 4 rather consistently over the past few months. But here again, we see Microsoft maybe going back to their old ways when all the stuff that is now exclusive to Xbox One from them is going to be playable on PC as well. So the Xbox One at this point is sort of more of a platform than a console in a way.
Yeah, they're clearly going for the unifying their synergizing their brands.
It's smart. I think it's about time.
From a company
frankly.
standpoint,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that this current console generation is, in my mind at least, this is going to sound like an oversimplification, but I think it's a really interesting flip-flop of the roles that Sony and Microsoft played in the previous generation, where Sony sort of arrogantly presumed that the success of the PS2 meant inevitable success for the PS3 and charged a ridiculous amount for this overpowered machine and
convoluted machine, really.
That was apparently very difficult to develop for.
Yeah.
I don't make games, so I have no idea, but consistently we heard from developers that the PS3 architecture was a bit of a nightmare. And then this console generation, it seems like Sony actually did learn from that feedback and offered a machine that was cheaper and easier to design for, and PlayStation Plus has consistently been a really good deal for people.
Yeah.
Whereas the Xbox One, they had all these ambitions that they immediately walked back when they received pushback at the initial announce, like the mandatory cloud storage and
That was
always
something else.
online, like
Yeah.
these ideas that actually weren't terrible but were presented in absolutely the worst way possible, and then they immediately backed out of all that stuff. And I feel like it's left the Xbox One in this kind of weird limbo that it has now recovered from, but it took a couple years.
Yeah, I think it just needed to sort of be a reasonable alternative, right, to PlayStation 4 without having these weird, like earmarked, like, either caveats or benefits that maybe people didn't understand, right? That just people weren't asking for.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely agree.
And we got Scorpio coming out in
It's the next step.
less than a year, I guess.
Yeah, that'll be the next milestone in the history books of Xbox, right? So we'll see. I don't even really have any like big predictions for that yet because there's still so much we don't know.
True 4K gaming, Scott.
We'll see.
Yeah.
We shall see.
All right, if you have any fond memories of the original Xbox or the 360 or the Xbox One, let us know in the comments below.